So then on to trying to answer these questions directly. This set of environmental projects, typical of my activities over the past 40 years. They indicate what one can do through effective volunteer organization and management. At times the issues seemed so hopeless that it was very difficult to continue. I'm convinced that were it not for my deep sense of attachment to this place, I could not have continued. It was a basis for what some saw as courage, and persistence was wrongly conceived as creativeness. Out of all this, I believe I can answer the questions laid out at the beginning. I've learned many lessons from an adult lifetime as an environmentalist. The most important one and the most difficult one for me came from a psychologist who attended one of my adventures. I had the opportunity to be a host at a nationwide group of top Corps of Engineer managers for one day every year for about 4 or 5 years. I'd begin each day by saying, we're going on a hike in Allerton with these guys. These are people in the 35 to 40-year-old range. They're all engineering graduates. I pretty well understood their mentality, but as I came to see, I didn't really understand the main points. I begin each day by lecturing them on our walks on the fallacies of their local dam, the local dam proposal I knew so well, the one that threatened Allerton. But they would not enter into the debate at all. And I could not imagine why. They would talk sports among themselves as we hiked through Allerton Park. It's hard now to believe how blind I was to their needs. The psychologist that I finally drug along with me on this trip finally made me realize that if they accepted my arguments, the dams that they each were working on back in their home area were also inappropriate. That their professional life was misdirected. Their engineering schooling was socially harmful. The sacrifice made by their parents in sending them to college was wrong, and so on and so on. All this was too much to accept, so they silently told themselves that I had to be wrong and turned the conversation to sports. That was like lifting a veil. It was easily the most profound insight of my environmental education. Since then, in talking to farmers about change, I used the approach that the psychologist, so clearly put to me. It says, one must separate their past actions from their future potential. They must be congratulated lavishly for having been so successful in producing a good for society, in conforming to the desires and the rules of society. Now, however, society is changing the rules, and we need to rely on their inventiveness, their cleverness, their perseverance, their courage to abide by these new rules. It was as simple as that. I take it I'm getting close to the time. Yeah. So my second main question posed at the beginning of this piece was whether one could learn, I'm almost finished, learn or acquire a sense of place. I had to recenter my place somewhat from the village of Ivesdale to the community of Champaign, Urbana. Found myself drawn to the history of the community, reading the local newspapers from 1850 to the present. This led me to a non-environmental activity such as serving as self-appointed chief historian of the restoration of the Cattle Bank, the oldest building in the community, and working to restore the county's historic courthouse clock and bell tower. Over the years, I pursued a hobby of repairing old clocks, and this led naturally to learning the stories of many people in the community. From these experiences, I've learned that respecting the history of a place, both its culture and its ecology, are inherent indicators of a sense of place. A respect for the crafting of culture with that of nature. A sense of place must be an inseparable weaving of people with place. After living in the city for 40 years, I've seen the place at all times and in all seasons. Its terrible storms, deluged rains, whiteout snows, tornadoes, and droughts, as well as its beautiful days, evenings, and nights. I've seen how the people react to these events, and I've been a close partner in these reactions, making me into a citizen of this place. So I clearly believe that a sense of a new place can be acquired through a focused and persistent effort. These are the keys to developing that sense of place wherever you decide to stay, involving yourself in a kindly and effective way in the protection of the local environment, learning the history of the place, letting it be your guide, and finally exposing yourself to all of the outdoors conditions of the place. And certainly don't be hesitant to express the aesthetic basis of your action. Hopefully it's possible to start with a local sense of place and extend your awareness to a larger scale. My experience tells me that as we reach to larger and larger geographic scales of environmental concern, we become less and less effective. Clearly, organizations need to exist to address the large-scale problem, but those who run them will lose their fire of purpose if they did not start with a local sense of place and constantly renew that sense by their return. Finally, there's the question of the relationship between the two major social forces for change and a sense of place. As I see it, these two forces are science and religion, our topic for this workshop. To me, their common thread is that they are directed towards reducing our anxiety over the uncertainty of our future. Long at loggerheads, these two forces can combine to produce a sustainable future. Religion might set the moral obligations for why we should act, and science could narrow the range of how we should act, and a sense of place could tell us where we should act. Thank you.